All right, all right. Good morning, everybody. It is this is another Friday morning. We're back live. Warren, welcome back. Everybody, welcome back.
You.
If you're a business owner, you are in the right spot, right? Just on this episode, on this our show, we are business owners ourselves, but we also work with business owners. And so on this show, we're giving you practical advice, insights, struggles that we've been through in our life, our journey, and sharing those with you. And this is a great place if you are just looking to get motivated, maybe even hold yourself accountable. We're here. And so on our episode, we like to just, we don't really, we have maybe pre-show, we talk about a typical maybe topic or two, but if you know Dwarn and I, we'll go off the rails. And that's why we call it unscripted, because we do not script our shows. We maybe have a couple things we want to talk about, but definitely not scripted or anything like that. So you are in the right spot. So go ahead, grab your favorite cup of Joe, and let's jump back into the show. All
Love it,
right.
love it, love it.
Warren, welcome. Obviously, last week, we were away. We welcomed our baby girl into the world last week, so I was unable to do a live show. So we kind of did yeah. We kind of did
Congrats.
a recording of some of our most recent, kind of tips. So hopefully, if you watch that, you get some things out of that. But if you do have questions, as we're kind of getting into this and we're starting our conversations, if you ever have questions about anything, like watching live, drop them down below. We'll answer them. Or if you're watching the recording, feel free to drop them in the comments, and we are watching those, and we'll get you some answers to those questions as well. Because I think for me, and Dorian, you might feel the same way, but if you don't ask questions and you have them, I feel like you're only hurting yourself. And there's no dumb question. Unless it's a question that you've asked 5,000 times and gotten an answer for. But ultimately, there's no dumb question, especially when you're starting something that maybe you don't have experience in, or you're facing a struggle. It's always better to get assistance. I don't know. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think I always say that, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. And if you don't know, then this is how we learn. We encourage
Exactly.
children to ask questions in order to learn. So it's just what we're taught to do, and this is how you'll find a lot of really intelligent people will ask a lot of questions because they want to know more. They really want to know more. They want to find out more. So, and some things on the outset look really confusing. If you ask a few questions, it can suddenly become a lot clearer.
Yeah,
So,
I think ultimately, if you, and I struggle with this, so I'm going to talk about this from experience here. But if you happen to think that you are always the smartest person in the room, then you're only hurting yourself, right? You're only going to cause yourself to be limited, because if you have to see that the people you surround yourself with are people that you can learn from, right? People that are going to point you in the right direction, people that are going to call you out sometimes, right? And give you feedback, and you have to be open to that. You have to be willing to accept that, to be pushed forward in your life, in your journey. So I would say ultimately, if you're struggling with that, and I struggled with that for a while, where I always would just think, oh yeah, I don't need help with that. I don't need you know somebody to give me advice, or I don't need to ask a question about what people think about that. And now it's something that since I've been able to kind of open up and get some insights on that, it's kind of been eye opening for me, but also it's also helped me project me forward as well. So I
look,
would say yeah, go
a
ahead.
simple way to look at that, right, is if you go and you've got, let's say you're an accountant, e.g., Dave, and you have a problem with your car, pretty clear the mechanic's going to be the smarter person in that scenario because they've got more experience in that situation. Yet, if the mechanic came to Dave with a financial related situation, they'd be the smartest person about that situation. You don't know who you're sitting with and what experience and life experience and career experiences they have. So sometimes it's good just to sit back and listen and hear what they've got to say and ask those questions, and you may just learn something.
One, and I've said it before, and I give this example all the time, is about Henry Ford. When I was learning, kind of doing some, I don't remember what book or where it came from, but Henry Ford didn't know anything about cars, right? Yeah, but what he did was he surrounded himself with all the masterminds in the car industry back then, because he had a vision, and he surrounded himself with people that were smarter than him, that could help him achieve that vision. and now
Yeah.
his name is on millions of cars a year, so you can do the same thing. And obviously, don't, if you have a vision to do, Henry Ford, something like that, absolutely, then push forward, but you can't do it yourself. You definitely have to have people around you in your circle that are going to give you the momentum, the honest feedback. You don't want a bunch of yes people in your circle. Not going to do you any good either.
No, that's a good point, actually. I've had a couple of clients over from Australia this week, and one of the clients, it was my first time meeting him in person, and we were talking about their business, and one of the things that they shared was they had been trying to do acquisitions and mergers with other companies for a few years now to try and grow their business. They basically hit a plateau and they wanted to get to that next level. And that next level for them was an acquisition. And I was asking them how it had gone, and they said, well, every time we've put an offer in and we've worked with the brokers, basically we come up, they're not interested in, an acquisition from you. You're about the same size as them. They don't see that as a value proposition. So yeah, they're going to say no at this time. And they had no luck with it. So I gave them a couple of suggestions, because some of the other things they shared is they were at the point of adding an extra employee which needed to have a very specific skill set in order to help their business grow, which would have come at a cost, quite a large cost, and a ramp-up period. So I made the suggestion that why don't you look for somebody who's a sole operator in the same industry as you, who may not like the business part of what they're doing, but really enjoy the actual work part, the skilled part, and see if they're interested in coming on board as a acquisition, become a part of your company, get a full-time salary at a rate they're very happy with potential dividends or a buyout figure in a couple of years, whatever that looks like. You have to plan that out with them, but you also get their customer base as they come along. So therefore, you get the growth you're looking for potentially, and you get the technician that you're looking for in this instance. Right. And when I suggested that, it was a very interesting moment, because you could see it was something they hadn't considered. They hadn't considered going in and doing an acquisition of something smaller, because in his words, he thought he was purchasing a list. But when I put it in perspective of you could potentially get a staff member that you want to add to your team anyway, and the customer list to go with it, suddenly becomes a lot more of a lucrative solution to the problem, and a lot easier.
And I think the big piece there is that you don't necessarily have to always try to go bigger, right? You have to think outside the box. And for that, in terms of that example, if you look smaller, or you look somebody maybe, if you're maybe in an industry that is struggling, that's hard, and somebody that's in your network that has mentioned to you that they're struggling and they don't know what to do, maybe just have a conversation with them. I think everything starts with that conversation.
Absolutely.
Just go through and just follow up. But for me, the next step with that too is think of ways outside of it. Doesn't always require you to pay big amount of money up front to purchase.
No,
if they're motivated, there's owner financing. There's other ways as well, especially if you're buying a book of business, because, and this is true in the accounting world or any other sort of, industry that's the same, would be, offer like a percentage of sales that's like on a scaled down, sort of approach over the next 3 to 5 years, whatever it ends up being that you guys can negotiate, where it's like, okay, for everybody that returns the first year, I'll do a 50-50 split with you. For anybody that then returns the second year, it's like, 35%, and then it's 25%, and then it's 15%. Where, and here you're not penalized for buying a book of business that may not come to fruition, because people may decide to leave at that point, and you're only paying for people that you keep. And so if you are doing things like that, where you're buying a book of business or you're buying something like that, you want to make sure that you have some sort of provision in there where, if clientele drops off from the list by X amount of percent, there's an adjustment if you're not doing a percentage of, returned or if you, any sort of reduction like that, right? So whether it's, hey, if the book of business drops 25%, in the first year, the price changes to X amount, or whatever it ends up being. The simplest way would just be to do a percentage of sales over the first couple of years. And then after the end, either you could have like a small balloon payment, just a final payment, or it could just be considered at that point, it's considered paid in full. And, there's no more rights to the list or anything like that. And then make sure you also have like the non-compete, the non-solicit, all that kind of stuff. So.
But one of the
Good
things
morning,
that was,
Caleb. We are trying to stay warm. Here we have the wind chills of like -10 over here. Warren, I know you don't worry about that or anything like that.
oh, geez, I think it was like 30 something today. So that's degrees
crazy.
Celsius for those who are
Celsius.
curious.
So it's like what, 80?
Not
80
Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit? Yeah. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. But an interesting point to that too is one of the scenarios which I played out to him was when you do this potential acquisition, you don't have to acquire someone in your backyard either. You could do the acquisition in another region, location, and that can then be considered an expansion and a whole nother coverage zone for you. So you can actually take on an additional coverage zone as part of that as well. So it's a way to expand and get customers in different regions. And you might find that could be a very good way for that other business that couldn't grow either because they'd reached their plateau. By having that merger in place, you could actually have enough power and clout to get more clients in that other region and your region as well.
And I would say the biggest thing there is don't go at it like you're the only one who has to win out of this. Long term, if it's and do your due diligence first, but also like make it a win-win. We all win in this world, right? In business, when we work together, essentially. And if you're going into to purchase anything like that, don't go in with the mindset like, oh, I have to win this negotiation. Let's come up with something that we both are happy with, that nobody's gonna have bad feelings, and that you're gonna be, especially if you want a partner, like you said, in your circumstance, the idea there was that they were going to come in and like still be an employee. Like you don't want them to have this negative feeling that they screwed me over and now, they're still working for you or still working with you as a partner, whatever it may be, you know what I mean? So
absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? I mean, you've got to look at it. Anyone that you're going in to acquire has put in a lot of work at that point to get their business to where it is. And all you've got to do is remember how much work you put into your business and how many mistakes you made. And you could be in the same position as them a few years ago, a few months ago, or, one bad decision ago. So it's, you should play it fair. You should do something that's makes sense for both parties, because if it doesn't make sense to both parties, it's not a long-term solution and it's only going to hurt you more in the future. So you want to make sure both parties are walking away feeling good about it. And I think it was Cody Sanchez, one of the things that she talked about was her purchasing from businesses where the owners are not really they don't want to carry on their business anymore. They're at that age where they're just ready to move on. And they're just struggling with the idea. They're figuring the only option they've got is to close their business up. Well, a lot of these businesses that you could go in and work with and acquire could be in those sort of positions as well. You don't know unless you start having those conversations. And I think the conversations are not, do you want to sell to me? It's a case of, how's everything going in your business? Are you happy? If you could make one change in your business today, what would it be? Start those conversations and see what happens. And you might find that they say one thing that really sparks with you and go, this could be an opportunity to work together, or this could be an opportunity to present an acquisition to try, because maybe they're not, one of the things they say is like, I'm not getting enough time at home. My relationship is struggling because I haven't got enough time to spend with my family. I'd love to get more time with my family, but I'm just at that point. I can't hire anyone to be a part of, to help me grow. I'm just not at that point. So I'm they're sitting in the middle. So an acquisition could be a perfect solution to help that. Or it could just be they go, you know what? I thought I was going to get into business and make a bunch of money and get a bunch of free time. And all I've done is bought myself a job. And
one that's the, and it's a lot easier, and I've made this suggestion to a couple of clients, right, where it's a lot easier to go out and find somebody that already has the book, already has the clientele, then try to build it yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like you said, you could buy, $1 million business, depending on how you can negotiate, for like $25,000 to $50,000 down, right? And even sometimes that can then be in, depending on your financing. If you do owner's financing, you could probably do it with like nothing down, depending on how you negotiate, especially if they're motivated to sell, and you give them good term, et cetera. So don't think that there's no opportunities out there. Like, you just have to think outside the box. You have to think differently. And this reminds me of, you shared it with me. I think the Jesse from the Savannah Bananas, right? He was doing a presentation. You sent me the clip, and he talked about how you have to be the one that's going to shake up the market and do things differently if you want to be different and you want to stand out. And it's funny because, like, I've had these conversations with my clients about contracting, about offers, and they keep going back to, well, nobody does that yet in their industry. Well, I haven't seen that in the industry yet. Well, it's like, of course, because nobody's willing to try something different. You have to be the one to try something different if you are looking to stand out. If you want to be like everybody else and then compete on price or compete on, your basic service, then just keep doing what everybody in your industry is doing. But if you want to be different and you want to stand out, then think something differently. Offer benefits that are on both sides, not just to you, but to the client, and make sure that it is, beneficial for both. But don't just follow just because it's status quo. I think the biggest, you name me a company, and its most successful companies have broken the status quo.
Well, you have a look at Apple, probably the most iconic company in the world. When they came out with the multicolored bloody computers, everybody looked at them and was like, oh, are you serious? But that got them back into the market. That saved the business. Then when they came out with, we're going to put an entire record collection in your pocket with an iPod. Everyone's like, hang on, what? This is nuts. What is this? And they changed the industry overnight. And then they went and did it again with the smartphone. They just kept changing it, right? And look, admittedly, they haven't really done anything too revolutionary since then, in my opinion. There's just a new version of a phone, but they still keep coming out with some pretty amazing technology, and they were pioneers when they got there. Do you think Nokia and those guys were sitting there feeling really good about themselves at that point when they heard about the iPhone? The BlackBerry guys were pretty confident with what they had built for the business users.
Listen, I want a BlackBerry, but I would, if BlackBerry came out right now, I would go and buy a BlackBerry over an Apple. Like, it's just a nostalgia fact, I think, but it would be cool to go back and maybe obviously not have a black and white or whatever color the screens were, but maybe having some, a colored screen.
It's so funny.
But I would go back to actually having the keyboard and the phone.
It's so funny you say that, because I saw an article the other day saying that there's going to be some sort of BlackBerry comeback device or something.
Oh my God. I would switch from an iPhone to that immediately. Right. Even if the iPhone came out with something that had a keyboard on it, I think I'd go back to it and just,
I get it.
You know what I mean?
It's a strange thing, right? Like, I totally get that. And it's like people with Nokia have got some of across Asia, their keypad phones still, because a lot of people still like keypad phones in this region for what they do. And if you think of people who don't have great data plans or data options, then those phones are great. It was the Apple made a data play, which is with AT&T, which is what got them the, basically the nail in the coffin for the BlackBerry guys, because they were all about trying to just get your email to your phone and doing it really, really efficiently, and messaging on your phone, doing it really efficiently. But they didn't think that anybody wanted a photo on their phone sent. They didn't think anyone would care to see what that looked like. And that was just one of those things where they were revolutionary, but they got stuck in their rut. And then someone else came out with something even more revolutionary and crazy cool. And even in cricket, you don't know how many of the listeners actually follow cricket, but you've got the Big Bash.
The cricket wireless.
Cricket is in the sport.
Oh, sport cricket. Oh yeah, I mean, I've
cricket.
heard of it. Yeah, but definitely never.
Yeah, big in Australia, England, and India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, that sort of region. Very, very big sport. They came out like they've got things like I'm not a big fan of cricket. They don't traditional. Don't get me wrong, but they'll do test matches which might last 5 days, which is just, in my opinion, ridiculous. So they're really, really long games. Well,
wait, did you say a game can last 5 days?
5 days. It's a test match.
Oh, yeah. That's crazy.
It is insane. So imagine when somebody comes out with the idea, we're going to do something called 2020. And it's that 2020 match drop games down to like 2 hours. So they suddenly start having bright uniforms. They start having like the Nana Banana sort of thing. It was very engaging and interesting. I was talking to a client this morning on a video call, and she's like very excited because she's off to watch a Big Bash game of cricket tomorrow live, and it's effectively a 2020 game. It's a very quick game in comparison to traditional cricket. And she's like, oh, it's so entertaining. They've got like fireworks here and this and that. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. It's like watching a Nana Bananas game.
Well, I think the lessons learned from that, right? Again, as we were just kind of chatting about, was that you have to be different, but how can you keep people's attention? And like baseball here has done that. We've changed the it's played because of the fact that like people lose interest because it's taking too long. So they, the pitch clock, all that stuff. And there's some people that hate it, right? But they're the nostalgia type, audience. But you have to keep your users' attention. I talked about this at an Alliance meeting. I was kind of talking about like the top 10 things that I'm seeing that you can really kind of begin to do a little bit differently in 26. And one of those was like offer decay. Like, when is the last time that you thought through your offer or, your programs? And if you haven't changed it in a year and you're just pitching the same thing to everybody, people are probably, it's decayed, and so you need to think of something differently. Maybe change it. You don't have to change the whole thing. You don't have to go and change your whole business, but just change the way the offer is, approached. Maybe change the name of it, right? Throw in an extra bonus. Whatever it ends up being, you can change an offer without necessarily changing the entire, service line that you're giving it.
And it's interesting. I mean, there is also the flip side of that sometimes too, where if you look at the big biro, the BIC biro pen, the old blue pen, that thing's been around, hasn't changed for 50 years, right? They're still selling them. It still works great. There's been no innovation on that product. It's a pen. There's going to be products that you can't innovate, but there's a lot of product and service. If you've got a service especially, you can innovate. And if you just look at what's changed in the world in the last decade and what was normal a decade ago versus what's normal now, it's actually very eye-opening. I see a lot of nostalgia videos on YouTube and social media. It's like, oh, if you're a 90s kid, you're going to remember this. And I'm watching going, oh, wow, yeah, I remember that. A Walkman, a Discman. Yeah, that was cool. Mini disc player. Oh, yeah. Laserdisc. Yeah, that came out for a minute. Blockbuster. Yeah, I used to go in and pick videos, VHS videos off the shelf and get excited and then my parents get annoyed because we didn't get them back in time and got a fine.
Right. Or ones that were round or whatever, and then you had the rewind fee and all that fun stuff.
Oh, yeah, please be kind, please rewind. I had friends who owned video stores and they were very successful at it because, it was great. But times change. And I was saying to my wife just the other day, I said, how crazy is this? You go out and buy a brand new TV a decade ago. The biggest concern you got is picture quality and brand quality. Nowadays, and then size, of course, that comes into play. Nowadays, like I'm looking at my big screen TV in the living room going, I think I need to replace it, not because it's broken, not because it's not working, not because the screen quality is not great, but because it's bloody slow to open up apps like YouTube app, Netflix app, and it can't support support Prime, HBO, Disney, all these other channels that the family and the kids want to watch, right? So I'm like, I have to go and buy a new TV to support those platforms. Now, that's a television that's innovated, and what they've done is effectively said, even if you've got a perfectly good TV, you still need a new one if you want to be able to use these other services to be more convenient. So
yeah, and I think ultimately they do those too, right? Because they want you to keep going. And so I had the question in the alliance meeting too, where it's like, okay, well, it was I can't remember what type of company it was, but essentially they had a service that a lot of people started with, and they wanted to get people to kind of like the next level, right? So it was like an entry level program, and then they wanted them to continue on and get, kind of expand, right? The upsell of providing more services. And the question was, well, how do I effectively do that? And we kind of broke it down. And initially it was, and I won't use the exact prices here, but as an example, so let's say their entry level program for a year was like $2,500. And a lot of people paid that. They got the service, they got the results, everybody was happy, but they didn't see, or they weren't getting the value of the next level. So they would just kind of either renew or they would fall off. And I asked, what is your next level price? What do you, and right now that next level price was about, I think it was just shy of like $10,000 a year. And I said, and what do you feel like the outcome, the people that have gone through that, what is the value that they get from that level of service? And the outcome is like, 3, 4, 5x that, so they know there's a value there. I said, okay. I said, what is the biggest sort of issue that you're seeing with individuals right now when you present this option to them? And it's price, right? It's obviously 4x the investment. And I said, okay, how about you want to get $10,000 out of it? I said, so increase the price of it, because it's still going to be 3, 4, 5 times that value. So if somebody wants to come into that service, they're still getting the value for it because you're still providing that outcome. So increase it to like 12.5 or 13. Okay. Now it's a little bit more prestigious still from level 1, and it's still worth it. So you're not, saying, hey, I'm increasing the price, but the value is still only 10,000. Then as you're making the presentation to your level 1 clients, instead of saying, hey, by the way, like I want you to jump up, here's what I'm going to do, right? Our level 2 program, it's 13 grand. But because you're already part of level 1 and you've started to see the success, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your investment, everything you've paid so far for level 1, I'm actually going to roll that into our level 2 program. So now instead of paying, right, the 13,000 or the 12.5, whatever the level 2 is, you're only going to have to pay, 10 or, 85, 95, whatever it ends up being. And we're going to roll that forward so that you don't lose any of your investment, but now you got all that service and you're now getting all this extra level. And now they're feeling like they haven't lost anything. Right? They feel like they've actually gained and they have, right? It's still worth it. You're not pricing your services, your programs, you're not just picking numbers out of the sky. It's worth it because you know the outcome that you've gotten results.
Yeah. You're repositioning.
Mm-hmm. You're repositioning. And the idea with that now is that now they don't feel like they've lost anything because they're rolling forward their entire investment and they're getting extra level service to get this extra level of value to continue the path forward. And that's how it's a journey and you map that out. And the other advice I gave in this is that make sure at the beginning of your engagement, you map out that journey for them, right? Hey, here, I just want to share this with you. This is a typical path forward, a client journey per se, from start to finish with our organization. Everybody comes in at this entry level if they want, like yourself, and then the actual progression is to then go to level 2, level 3, however many levels you have, and share the value at each level with them up front. You're setting that expectation. Hey, once we get the results for you that we're promising you, or kind of overviewing here with you for level 1, are you ready to go to, or will you be ready to go to level 2? And then get that buy-in from them up front as well, and share all that information. Like, just be transparent with them up front. Hey, level 1, we want to start with you. Level 2, we're going to expand that progress. We're going to keep it moving forward. And then level 3 and 4 is we're really going to put it in place where we're going to help you scale. And this is how we've done it. And now they know from the get-go, okay, it's not just one service, or they're prepared for the upsell essentially because you've already told them about it. And you set that expectation, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. So first, think of your pricing, and think of like what is that you would like to get out of each level, and then how do you kind of build your pricing structure where it's still valuable, but now you can roll forward each prior investment into the next level, and your clients aren't losing what they've paid because essentially you're giving them that discount. And now if anybody comes in at level 2, they're paying that 13 because it's worth it. And you're still getting the same as if they would have paid for level 1 because you're still giving them all that service as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what it is you're giving them the outcomes right from the outset. And by laying out what the outcomes potentially are and what they're going to get, the value propositions they're going to get along the way, it really helps them understand. We do the same thing when it comes to digital marketing, right? We talk about this is your website. The next stage logically would be SEO with some maybe an AdWords campaign and some social media coming on top of that. Pick a channel and we'll work with it. And your results you can expect are this at 6 months with SEO, this with AdWords within 2 months, and this with social media within a month or two. That way you've got an expected outcome, and you take them on the journey. But it's all about the customer journey at the end of the day, more so than just putting numbers on paper. And if you're hoping that people are going to go to that next transition, then you've got to give them that journey. You've got to educate them on that journey. You've got to be talking about what that next step looks like throughout the entire first part of the course. Because if you're not getting them ready for what comes next. And if it feels like a shock and they feel like, wow, I got a lot out of that, I think I'm happy here, it means that you probably haven't shown enough value in what that next step looks like to be able to get them to take the step into that next step.
And you hit it there, right? It's value. And that also then goes into one of the other things that I'm going to talk about in a second, but I'm going to pause here for a minute. So if you have questions, drop them down below. We love you guys. If you're here and you've gotten something out of our first part of our conversation, make sure you're subscribed, hit that notification bell, and help us, as we say every episode. We are on a path, on a goal to impact 1,000 business owners right now by the end of 2028. So help us with that. So if there's something that you find from this episode that's impactful to you as a business owner or your journey, feel free to share it with your network, and we appreciate you. Also, let us know down below if you've taken some advice that we've shared on this episode. What has that impact been? Share a win down below. We'd love to hear your wins as well. But before we kind of roll forward into the next idea that I wanted to talk about there, I wanted to talk, and we want to share software. And I wanted to do this because we typically like to do it in the middle of the episode, and we're right about there. So Dwarn, for me, when I was thinking of what software is that really impactful, something that helped me yesterday, and that's, we've talked about it before, but I think it's something that you need to leverage, and that is definitely AI, right? And ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever one that you typically, use. And I'm going to give you an example of what I was doing yesterday and how it truly helped me and why it's impactful. So as an accountant, as a bookkeeper, right, or, and a mentor, some of our situations are trying to solve clients' platform information that may not tie directly into their bank activity. And we need to figure that out on our own because they are not, essentially going to have an understanding of what comes out of the system. And in their mind, especially when these platforms are designed for specific types of industries, and they tell them, oh yeah, we integrate with that, don't worry, like everything's fine, like all you got, this makes your life simpler, right? But what they don't tell you is how much more difficult they make it on the back end in the bookkeeping and the accounting. And so the example of this is I have a client, they are in real estate, right? They're a brokerage. And so the system, awesome for a brokerage, handles all the paperwork, handles all the payouts, handles everything, right, with their accounting system. It integrates with their accounting system, but it sends every single individual line of transactions over to the accounting system, okay? And then what it does is when it pulls money out of the bank account, it aggregates all those things into one amount that comes out of the bank account at the end of the day, or it gets deposited into the bank account at the beginning of the day. And so for an accountant to then try to reconcile all the single lines of activity in the accounting software with the one number every day, it is very, very difficult, right? Especially when things may roll over from the end of the month to the next month. And so a real life example of here how I use ChatGPT was, they have their detailed general ledger report from the platform. And I had to download that, the hundreds and hundreds of lines of data. And for me, I wasn't going to go through it. I wasn't going to put my accountant to go through it. We don't have the time for that, right? We're trying to close everybody. So how I used AI was I said, here is the detailed general ledger report. Here is the bank statement amounts, right, that I need to tie to for withdrawals and deposits. This activity sums, here's the column that has the deposit activity. Here's the column that has the payout activity. What I need you to do is on 2 separate spreadsheets, I need you to go through the deposits and I need you to go through the payouts. And I need you to find the transactions that sum up to these totals exactly with no variances. Took a little back and forth at the start, but eventually it figured it out. And now I have a process in place with ChatGPT to pull that data every month, drop in the bank statement activity for it, and now it matches.
Nice.
And so that did it, right, where I'm working on other things, and I had to go back and forth to it a little bit. But for me to have to go through hundreds of lines of Excel spreadsheets and try to match it up, and it's not only hundreds of lines, but it's also like, I think like 50 columns of data. That would have taken me a while to figure that out. Obviously, you can do pivot tables, you can do all this kind of stuff, right? But the fact that it was again to give me
the streamlined process, right? You're taking a very analytical, data-driven process, and you're asking for this tool to help you make sense of it better.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask it to help find patterns. You can ask it to look for anomalies. There's so many cool things you can do with it. And you say ChatGPT, there's all these amazing things out there now. Gemini has Nano Banana for creating some incredible imagery. Google has Notebook LM. Notebook LM, like we've been playing with that. Drop in a document. I did it with a client today. I dropped one of their product documents in for a piece of machinery they have. I asked it to generate a quiz. I asked it to create flashcards. I asked it to create a slide deck, a audio conversation.
I love this one. So let's talk about this one more because we can go into this one next week in depth. Let's go to Note. I love LM as well. So if you're listening, that's just a preview because we'll get into it. We'll actually make this a big conversation next week because Notebook LM is a game changer, not only for business owners, but if you have students, as you were mentioning, if you have staff. Like it's not just for marketing anymore. We'll give you we're actually going to make next week next week is going to be the Notebook LM episode. We will come with examples of what we've done, what we've seen other people do. Maybe we'll even pull it up live and do a couple things live if you're interested. And let me just confirm. I just want to make sure maybe it might not be next week because I think we might actually have a guest next week. So let me just confirm this while we're talking. We do. Okay, so we do have a guest.
While you confirm that,
we have one on. The 6th. But
I was able to give my client.
We're going to make the 13th the Notebook LM episode.
I love it.
Let's do it. Talk about it, and we're going to deep dive into it because we have a couple guests coming up in the next couple weeks.
Let me give a little teaser here, Dave. Within 10 minutes, I generated all these documents, and the client's jaw was on the floor at what I was able to do. And initially, when I hit the quiz button, because I was doing screen share, it's like, what would we need that for? And I said, new product lines coming out, and you have sales training required for your staff. I said, what about flashcards? And I'm like, 64 flashcards generated on this, and I'm like rolling them up, and she said, oh, that's like every question a client would possibly ask. And I said, yep. There, answer.
So let's talk about this because I think this is really good on that episode because there's a lot of other like flows and everything like that.
100%.
We're going to make the 13th.
I'm excited about that episode.
I think that's going to be awesome. So and plus now this gives us a little bit more time to kind of put it together. So if you're watching this, you're watching a recording, mark down the 13th of February as your Notebook LM show where we're going to give you all the fun stuff that we've done that we could possibly do. Or if you want to be live on that, make sure you mark it down. Drop if you're live on that episode, you'll be able to drop a note down below, and we'll take your situation and we'll create something for you in Notebook LM there too. So, but to close up the software, I would definitely say like you have to integrate AI somehow in your business, in your day to day, because it is going to save you a lot of time. If I had to try to figure that out in the example here, and I had to figure that out myself, it would have probably taken me, a couple days to go through, figure it out, balance everything. But here, once it did take me a little while up front, I would say, probably going back and forth, maybe like an hour and a half, 2 hours to actually figure out the process. But then I figured out 1 month, but then I was able to do the rest of the year in one go. I was able to drop out, the entire spreadsheet for the rest of the year instead of just 1 month into the ChatGPT and say, hey, take the method that you just did and now do it for the rest of the year. And here's all the statements. Here's the actual full data. And it was able to do that in half the time. So now I did, 5 months, in basically an hour and a half instead of, once I figured it out to then develop that process. So for yourself, think of what are you doing manually now? What are some things that you could potentially, right? If you're looking through a lot of spreadsheets or you're looking through a lot of data, how could you use AI to then simplify that and be detailed in the prompt, give it all the information, then let it go? It could be your own data analyst. And essentially that's the biggest thing about like AI, even Gemini, ChatGPT. I use both. And I try to, sometimes one's not working, so I go to the other one and that one works, and then vice versa. So you can go back and forth, but I would say definitely integrate something into your business related to that can help you analyze your data. Even if you're, for example, take me out of a job, right? You could take your financial statement, drop it in there and say, hey, act like a CFO. And what do you see about this financial statement? You can do that. There's so many cool things that you could do and integrate into your day to day, but I am excited for the 13th. We're going to get that going. But so with that, Jordan, the other thing that I wanted to kind of then go into from the first part of the conversation, and you had mentioned about value that you had, if you're facing some resistance, it's probably because you have not shown the value of your next level. And I think the biggest thing, because this came up in the conversation with our alliance meeting as well, was the resistance to, or maybe this wasn't the alliance. I think this was like a pod meeting that I was part of. And it was, people aren't closing. Like they know they have a problem, but they're not closing at the end of a sales conversation. And the biggest thing for me here, and advice that I give here, is that you probably haven't created that gap large enough yet, right? So, they're here, they want to be, and they want to be here, but you haven't, and this gap is what they're willing to invest to get here. So if you're facing price issues, it's probably because you haven't created a big enough gap. They still feel like, oh, it's still attainable. You have to widen that gap by getting them to explain it to themselves. I want to be, stress-free, whatever that's being, I want to get over this obstacle. Okay, well, what's, and they're like, but, right now I'm here. And if you don't ask any follow-up questions, or you don't get them to, say, well, what's that costing you? This gap's going to stay small. But once you can start like saying, well, what's it costing you? And now they're like, well, it's costing me time with my family. It's costing me, money from new sales, right? And each question that they're answering is widening that gap. And then when you get to the end and you're like, well, if this was solved for you, like what would that mean for not only you, but your business, your employees, your family? What would it mean for all of them? And that's when, right, they start to realize maybe it is time for me to make a change. And maybe it is time for me to invest in this to then buy my time back. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. I think that it's that gap too. So, you mentioned the value, but it's also like you haven't created that emotional gap between where they are now and where they want to be in order for them to then get over the hump of saying, okay, I'm ready to invest.
And that's where, like, I love Jeremy Miner's neuroemotional persuasion questioning. Like, I've been doing it for decades, but in some way, not to the extent that he does, but I never really put a name on it. Basically, I was just trying to build the desire up for the emotional buy-in on whatever I was working on, selling, product, etc. And most people, like you'll find, when they're selling a product, it's not about the price initially. It's about getting the feeling, the emotional connection right, and then asking for a buy-in. And the buy-in doesn't have to be the price. It can be, would you like to fill out this form so that I can create a quote for you? Would you like to fill it? Would you like to have me prepare a customized proposal for you? In order to do that, I just need to find out a few more details. There's so many different ways. We used to call it the trial close. And and there's anyone in sales, like there's all these different techniques and styles, but basically most people who are selling something have to realize that the person who they're selling to doesn't need their product. They have a choice. They don't need their product. They choose to buy your product. They choose to buy your service. Very rarely are you the only person they can get that product or service from. And if you are, well, congratulations, you got yourself a very, very good niche. But for the most part, there's going to be competitors out there offering something similar or an alternative, which is probably going to be suitable enough for them to be happy with it, or they've just done a better job of selling it than what you have. And
yeah, I mean, ultimately, what that comes down to, is niche. I get the only thing that came to mind when you said that was like, if there's this life-saving medication, they're probably the only ones that kind of fall into that realm. Or you're like this high level, highly, like a Mr. Beast type, like there's only one of him, but typically 99% of you in business, there is going to be some other person out there that provides what you do. And this is why I was initially against niching down, but the more and more I talk to a lot of people and I've, kind of seen the results in the real world is that you don't want to be known as a dime a dozen. So if you're known as, a bookkeeper and that's it, they're a dime a dozen. You're always going to be competing on price. So you have to realize, like, have you niched down? And niching down doesn't mean you have to pick one thing and that's it. Like niching down just means you could be a sub industry type. You're the expert for that sub industry type in your market, and that's going to help you stand out. So when people try to negotiate on price, it's like, yeah, absolutely. Like I know, and be upfront with it. Like I told somebody the other day, it's like, I know I'm not the cheapest. And here's why. Because you're not just getting a bookkeeper. You're not just getting somebody
sell
that
your value.
is going to give you, right? Exactly. And I was upfront with it. And that then also actually negates their objection to price. Because you already say it up front and you already know what they're going to say. It's like, hey, I know what you're going to say, but you're going to probably tell me that it's, it's not the right time, that, the pricing's off and you're not ready. And here's what I'm going to say to that. Right now you don't have a time to waste. Okay. Because, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but you do know that you want to make better decisions. You do know that you need support. You want that support. So what's an extra $200 a month if it's going to get you back 10, 20, 30 times that? Because of the work that you're going to do, the effort you're going to put in, and the accountability you're going to be held to. So think through, what are those main objections? How can you come up with them up front to negate the objection right away?
Interesting. There was a conversation this week that I was involved in, and one of the things that came up was there was a conversation around, I want to create more automation using the software package I have already. I'm already invested in it. I've already set it up as far as I think I can set it up without putting some more serious time on my own in. I think my best bet at this point is to pay X other person sitting there in the conversation with us for him to go and set it all up for me, because it's a better use of my time. And at least that the automations will be set up correctly and they'll be done much quicker than I would be able to get to it myself. And it was a self-realization of that other person sitting there, the value they offered. Now, they'd been working with them for 6 months, but they had chose to try and do more on their own and realized that it actually cost them more time, which potentially meant that they were further behind them than they should have been.
Right.
So they made the decision to spend the money because they saw the value proposition in that. Now, are there other people that does the same thing as him? Absolutely. Is he the most affordable? Not at all. But he does the job really, really well, and he's fair, and he's quicker than what the customer could do it himself.
And this is the mindset shift. This is the biggest mindset shift from this point is you have to, as an owner, as a leader, one, you have to stop seeing yourself as the employee that's got to do it all. You've got to stop being in the weeds. You have to start running, leading, all of that. The second part of that is you have to realize, what is your value per hour? Okay. And if, for example, that when you're out there, you're negotiating, you're talking, you're selling your business, your time per hour is $100, $150, $200 an hour. And you're doing these tasks that can be outsourced for $10, $15, $20 an hour. How much money are you actually costing yourself by keeping control of that duty or that task? When in reality, you're like, okay, if I can do $200 an hour, I can outsource this for $20 an hour. That means every hour that I'm outsourcing that I already, am doing myself, that's essentially making me $180 an hour, because I know as long as you're going to go out and do the work, right, that it's going to make me $180 an hour. So if you're doing 5-10 hours a week of these tasks, that's 18. It's always $2,000. And so if it costs you a quarter of that, it's a no-brainer. And you have to start thinking and seeing things this way. Even if it's an employee in-house, it doesn't even necessarily have to be like an outsource to a contractor. Just be, what's the cost of bringing in an employee? And then if I get that time back, right, after they're settled and they're up and running, what does that free me up to do to then continue to grow the business? And ultimately, as long as there's like a 3, 4, 5 times the return on that outsource, it's worth it. Now, the one that makes it hard, that is for a lot of people, is like personal. They're like, I'm spending 90 hours a week working on my business. How do I outsource? And it's like, okay, well, how much is time with your family, if you have, and that's what it's taking you away from? How much is that worth to you? And many times it's priceless. So like, it doesn't, there is no price to that. And there's a couple things. Maybe it's not outsourcing. Maybe it's just deciding to cut back. Maybe it's actually looking at everything that you're doing, and it's like, okay, where is my ROI on my time, and cut out everything that's not giving me an ROI. It
Well, it's
doesn't necessarily
interesting.
always have to be, it's that mindset shift of, okay, where's my hours? And if you have the money, right, because it's going to make you money, then look at where you can outsource this. And if it's just because you're doing too much, look at where your ROI is, and then make adjustments from there.
Well, it's interesting you should say that. Another part of a conversation with the same client was actually talking about the ideal client that they have, and what they were advised is that they had a certain size client that was a perfect client for them, and anything below it actually cost them money to deliver services to. Now, they were in a position where they hadn't quite gotten to enough of those new clients at the right size yet, but they had a process. Every time they brought on a new client that was at the right size, they have started culling 3 clients that are not the right size. And they found that they're actually not spending any more, they're not losing any more, and they're maintaining the status quo for their income. But they're freeing additional resources internally because of it. Because they found the smaller clients that didn't meet the criteria that they've now said, they got them when they were in that period of desperation and startup. And they've carried them on for 10 years now. But what's happened is it's now costing them money to have those people on board because they're very noisy. They are used to getting the attention, and now they have to pay for staff to do that work. They've realized that there's a real cost associated to deliver that. So I found that was really enlightening to hear that, because between that, working out what the ideal customer was, working out what automation they need to put into their business to try and streamline portions, it was pretty interesting to see that they're willing to invest in the right places to make their life easier and to help make their business more profitable, and be able to go after the clients they really wanted.
And that's another interesting fact. And I had this conversation with a client recently as well, right? Where you have to think, what is your margin? And this goes into, this where you have to know your margins. But essentially, they're trying to chase down, let's say, $1,000, $1,500 jobs, which you may think is good, is sufficient. But their margin on these jobs, because of the fact that, they have overhead, they have people that have to run these jobs, it's only, about 60 to 70%. Or is overhead. So they're only gross margin on these anywhere between 30 to 40%. So for example, let's just say it's a $1,500 job, and you're grossing 40%. So that's $600. But he's trying to solve $1,000 sort of hole right now. Well, it's like, you're looking at the wrong size. you may think you're solving the problem by getting a $1,500 gross job, but in reality, right, you have to be looking at the margin on that job to solve your hole. So if your hole is $5,000, right, and you're trying to do it with a job that's going to gross you $450 to $600, it's going to take you 10 of those jobs to solve that hole. Whereas if you're looking to solve that hole with something that's like $15,000 or $20,000 job, one job that grosses that and that solves your hole, which one's easier? One may take a little bit more time, but it's easier in the end to close that. Especially if to close 10 smaller jobs, it's still going to cost you time in building relationships and outreach and follow up, all that stuff, which he's doing right now. He's got to go out and give estimates. He's got to go out and follow up. He's got to create the estimates. There's a lot of hours invested into these small $1,500 to $2,000 an hour jobs that are grossing not anywhere near the gap that he's trying to solve. And it's like, you have to think bigger in terms of like larger clients, larger projects. And those are the people you need to reach out to, longer term contracts. And when you can do that, now you're actually solving because you know your margins. If you don't know your margins, you're just guessing, you're only going to look at the top line number. I had this conversation, years ago with one of my janitorial clients. They came and they're like, oh yeah, I'm bringing in $5,000 a month, or, from this one client. It's great. It's awesome. Okay, let's break it down. How many hours does it take your worker to do that on a monthly basis? Right. And by the time we broke down salary, taxes, they were paying mileage, supplies, she found that on that $5,000, she's making hundreds of dollars. Yeah. So every month in her mind, she's like, I got 5,000 coming. I got 5,000 coming. This is awesome. Yeah. But all that money is going out to your people. It's not 100%.
It's going out to pay to be able to do the job.
Right. When you start looking at jobs as an owner and you start looking at your business as an owner, you can't think top line anymore because you have costs, you have outsourcing, you have support that goes with that top line. It now needs to be, what is my margin on that job? My gross margin, right? So what are the direct costs that go along with it? And then what am I going to make afterwards to kind of pay for the overhead, your salary, your profit as an owner? And if you are only looking at top line, you're looking at it the wrong way. I actually had somebody message me the other day. Hey, I just submitted a $60,000 proposal. Okay, it's awesome, but what's that going to net you? And it was kind of eye-opening at that point. It's like, oh shit, you're right. Like I have to have time, I have to have staff, I have all these things that go through with it. And this is why it's important to have somebody by your side, to partner, to listen to podcasts like us, listen to anybody else. Like again, we're not the only ones in this space. There's tons of people out there that can give you advice. We're not saying we are your only people that are going to give you advice, but surround yourself and hold yourself accountable. We've talked about the mirror moment in the past. You got to look yourself in the mirror. But ultimately, if it's not only like the right client, but it's also understanding your margin on your ideal client, and is that the right ideal client for the gap you're trying to solve or the margins you're trying to make?
And understanding the service you're offering, what is the real cost involved in doing that? Because it's not as easy as going out and buy a drop shop selling business.
Drop shipping.
People go and put their website. Drop shipping business where they go and that's right. I was just confused with the word for a second. I was like looking for it. But drop shipping businesses was really big for a long time because people going out, they were getting supplier relationships, drop shipping stuff. But then what they forgot to factor in is, yes, you're making your 20, 30% margin, but you got to pay tax. You got to pay for your marketing. You've got to pay for your ads. You've got to pay for your shipping. You've got to pay for all these other things that come into play. First time someone tries to return something, oh, this is not fun. I have to deal with this. There's time involved in that. There's costs involved with it. The first time somebody decides to report that they never received the product, and instead of contacting you, they contact your bank or their bank rather, and then suddenly you get $1,000 pulled out of your account. It's not as much fun. You've got to, how many sales do you have to make now to make up that lost revenue while you sit there and fight to get that back from the bank? And in some cases, you may not win. So a lot of these businesses that seem very lucrative on the outset, and you think I can just run this on a really low margin, I can do this, I can undercut everybody in the market. It's not worth it in a lot of cases. There's a reason people are charging what they charge because they've probably done the maths. They've probably worked it out. They've probably worked out that it costs time. It costs money to have somebody sitting at a desk answering a phone for them to make sure that we can give good customer service to somebody.
Yeah, and if you're only, I mean, if your focus is on price, right, like you said, with small margin, if you're literally like, I'm just gonna do on price, you're basically on a race to non-existence. You're on a race to closing your doors. You can't think that way anymore. You provide value and provide value that's significantly higher, but it's okay. Like, you can do that. There's a reason why people pay salaries to people, because they feel like they're getting value out of them. You could essentially almost save people a lot of time if you could outsource the tasks that somebody in their their employment is doing, by saving them taxes and benefits, all this stuff that they don't have to pay anymore. So one of the biggest things I've told a lot of people to do is, look in your area and find people that are hiring for your position, and just give them a call. Hey, would you be interested? Have you ever thought about potentially outsourcing this support, outsourcing these tasks? I'd love to have a conversation. Even if it's not right, at least we have a conversation. You have all the information before you make a hire. It's the best way you could do it.
That's an interesting approach. That's cool. There's more than one way to skin a cat, right? And at the end of the day, it's about thinking outside the box sometimes to get the results. So I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up, because I know, Dwarren, as you said, you were a busy week. I want to get you some rest. So next week we have a guest, James. He's in sort of like the mentoring space. He's owned a couple businesses in landscaping world and the service world. I'm looking forward to that conversation, and he will be able to kind of give us some insights, guides on that, especially because he and I are in that kind of industry. My niche is those service-based businesses, B2B as well as B2C. So I'm looking forward to that conversation with James and you, Dwarren. I think it'll be some good education for everybody. But just so you know, if you didn't miss it and you missed it earlier, mark February 13th on your calendar. Dwarren and I are excited for that episode. We're going to give some insights, some tips, strategies, things that we've done in Notebook LM, and how it can be impactful for you and your business, and how you can use that in your business or your teams. Not just like for you as a business owner, but how can you use it with your teams? How can you use it if you have kids in school, anything like that. So I'm looking forward to that episode. So, Dwarren, what's one thing that you really hope people walk away today's episode with?
I think it really comes down to, for me, be prepared to look outside what's comfortable at other options, and see whether it's an acquisition that you've been trying to make, whether it's getting more sales, whether it's just trying something new to differentiate yourself in your market. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but give it a go, and surround yourself with people, a network of people who are actually like-minded, or at least they're going to give you honest advice, not just a pat on the back and say, great effort, good work. Because sometimes you need that, but sometimes you also need that honest advice, and just when you ask the question, they're going to give you the real answer, not the answer you want. And that's the one thing you got to be careful with AI as well, is when you're asking a question, it's going to not be totally honest with you sometimes. It's going to be giving you a vague answer, or something it feels like you might like, depending on your personality you've trained it with. So don't go relying on ChatGPT or Gemini to be that person if you haven't told it, I want you to be really critical of what I'm going to tell you. It's not going to sit there, and it's not going to be that person. So sometimes having real people in your network that you can communicate and work with, it's going to be a huge benefit for you.
Absolutely. And I would say for me, I think the biggest thing is understanding that mindset of outsourcing, delegating, and beginning to approach your business as a business owner, not necessarily an employee in your business, but an actual business owner. And how do you lead it? How do you grow? How do you get out of that I have to do everything mindset and be the bottleneck, and start looking at what is my best way to, and you may have to obviously take a pay cut a little bit at the beginning, but ultimately, if you want to scale, there's always some expense up front, whether it's time, whether it's money, anything like that. You have to be willing to, kind of let that go for a little bit, train some new people. But in the long run, they're going to be trained on what you want them to do, and they're not going to be able to do that task for you. So that's what I really hope that, some people can get out of today's episode is
get out of that mindset. You may be in it. I was in it for a while, until I became, a really, strong leader in corporate and now in business. And, realizing that, yes, nobody's ever going to do it as good as you. But if you can give them the steps, you can give them the guidance on how to do it like you, it'll be well. And be patient with that. So with that, I hope everybody has a wonderful and amazing week. Again, next week, we're going to have a guest on who is in, again, sort of the coaching space, but he's had a lot of successful businesses in the landscaping world. So James, we're looking forward to having you on next week. And then mark your calendars for February 13th. February 13th, we're going to do a full Notebook LM episode with studies, etc. So mark your calendars for that. And then the week after next, just so you know, we also have Mark. Mark's a CPA. We're going to have him on and talk through some costing, some business, strategies as well on the tax side. So if you have questions for either one of them, drop them down below. We'll make sure that we ask, but mark your calendars for those episodes, because I think it's going to be important for everybody to get in live, ask questions to those, and we'll get them answered. So with that, we hope you have a wonderful and amazing week. Thank you for joining us. If you are here, we love you. You're watching the episode live, or maybe you're watching the recording. We love you. We appreciate your support. Again, make sure you like, subscribe, share this with somebody. We're on a mission to serve 1,000 business owners by the end of 2028. So we need your help with that. So go ahead and share this episode. Warren and I definitely appreciate it. And then down below, if you're interested to learn more about Triumph Business Solutions, scan, I don't know how you want to point it, what it's here, but scan that QR code. It'll give you kind of a quick overview of who Triumph Business Solutions are and what we can potentially do and help you, support you, and partner with you. And then with Dwarn, reach out for Dwarn. Dwarn can help you on the automation side, CRM side, all of that fun stuff. So with that, we appreciate you. Hope you have a wonderful and amazing week. Dwarn, thanks for joining me again. And we'll see everybody. We'll see everybody
Thanks,
next week.
Dave. Everybody.
Everybody.
Bye.